Welcome back to Ground Zero Salem. It's your host Pat once again. So couple of adjustments here. Sorry for that squeaking noise. I'm back on the mic. I was actually for those reaction video things, drama videos, whatever. But this is me attempting to get the best quality possible, so I'm going to try to sync up audio recorded separately in Audacity. So I don't know why you need to know that, but just in case the audio is weird, I'm still a work in progress as always. I'm back from vacation. We were in Florida for 5 or 6 days. I've just been taking it easy for this weekend. Got back last Friday. I'm back at work tomorrow. The Florida trip was cool. Nothing notably metal or record shoppy about it. We just kind of hung out in a very nice beach house that was massive that my stepdad and my aunt footed the bill for. Nothing that I would have been able to afford on my own. It was like a reality show house with like a heated pool with a slide. There was an elevator in this thing, this structure that we stayed in, rooftop lounge area, just total like insanely rich people stuff. So probably the only time I'm going to get a chance to ever do anything like that. So it was a lot of fun. Big shout out to my family. Everybody hung out, multiple generations. It was super chill. Did a lot of hanging out and listening to music, but not really so much buying any or thinking about anything current going on. We drove past a record store on the way to the airport in Sarasota, and that was pretty much it for music stuff at the time. I took a vacation not only from work, but from my own pursuits. But I'm back. The dry spell of not buying stuff online is over. The floodgates haven't really opened the way I was hoping they would not. Because, I think Marty over at Metallurgy always talks about that. You take a sabbatical and you try not to buy anything for a month or two, and then you just spend double than what you would have spent while you were abstaining. Hasn't really been the case, but there's been a few hot ticket items that I was like, ooh, I want to get that. That's going to be the thing I'm going to treat myself on. There's like 2 or 3 of those things that I ordered, which I'll be talking about in the future. But right now, there's the second half of a pile of CDs, the kind of doom death rabbit hole that I've been going down up until I started abstaining. I got a few things. I got a few recent things in the mail that were inspired by Into the Void. On top of my pile here are a couple of CDs by the Plasmatics. The reason I purchased these was that we watched Into the Void, my better half and I. If you haven't seen it, Into the Void is a series on Hulu that's pretty well done. I'd say it's got the same vibe as The Dark Side of the Ring, if anybody's familiar with that, any wrestling fans out there, where you could tell it's a docu-series, might be a little bit on a shoestring budget, maybe. There's like a lot of kind of creative, dramatic recreations of stuff that go in slow motion and they're blurry to like show that it's happened in the past and it's somebody's memory, that kind of thing. And then there's a lot of interviews with talking heads that were around for it. The Plasmatics, Wendy O. Williams episode was amazing. I thought it was great. I knew a bunch of things about her, but it kind of helped flesh out more of like her legacy and what she was all about. Like, fascinating person, very, very brave. Had no issue like standing up to the Milwaukee police and getting her ass kicked for obscenity charges. Definite real deal free speech warrior. So I was inspired by that. I had one of these. I had no hope for the Wretched on vinyl, but I wanted to get a couple of discs. I'm going to fill out my collection of Plasmatic stuff over the weeks to come, but I thought that was great. The NME bit was really, really interesting. It was particularly interesting to me that they covered very obvious metal stuff, like the passing of Randy Rhoads in the early 80s, as well as the Judas Priest trial, things like that. The Dimebag Darrell incident is the last one, but covering NME, going in a bunch about Wendy O. Williams, as well as Anne Boleyn from Hellion and New Renaissance. I thought those were good choices to kind of cover all over the map in terms of obscurity. So all in all, I'd recommend Into the Void. I thought it's pretty well done. Like I said, it seems like, there's probably a limited budget with putting it together, but it looks very, very good visually, and it's totally enjoyable. Maybe it's the same people that were involved with Dark Side of the Ring, or maybe it's just the documentary style of it. I'm not really sure. So anyways, I've got I don't know, I think about 20 CDs or something here. got these Plasmatics ones at the top. These are, recent purchases. Got them right after we watched it when we got back, and Amazon primed it. But we got Beyond the Valley of 1984 and No Hope for the Wretched. These were reissued by their own label in the early 2000s, and I think they're the same pressings. They just are sitting around. I don't know. They haven't sold out. Maybe they pressed a ton of them. I don't know. It's really funny. It's like on the back it says, visit scenicplasmatics.com, if that gives you any idea. So it's very like of the era, early 2000s. Well done. The cover art is not pixelated or anything like that. Musically, you can see why they were so important to metal and punk. And I think a lot of people have said they're kind of unheralded as an early example of crossover. And I wouldn't disagree. The music's a lot more aggressive than I remember it being. I remember seeing the video for The Damned, which is on Coup d'etat, which is the third album. I remember seeing the video for that all over MTV when I was a kid. Wendy's voice is super snarling and punk early on. I know she kind of develops her chops as more of a metal vocalist later, but these are a great example of just like metal tinged, nasty punk, verging on hardcore. I could see how certain songs might even be considered like early US hardcore in a different context. In a certain way, they almost kind of remind me of the Circle Jerks a little bit, which, maybe I'm just thinking that because of the album and the song title Coup d'etat, but I think just the chops, relatively simplistic songwriting, but really tight chops. Not that manic stuff that the Circle Jerks had with Lucky Lehrer, their original drummer, but certainly, a similar kind of snarling attitude and a little bit of the same kind of rock and roll feel. Maybe I'm just imagining it. I don't know. But it's a lot more aggressive than I remember it being. Very, very pissed off, attitude laden. Early example of shock rock, got obscenity charges all over the place. And an interesting role in the early CBGB scene too, which is pretty interesting. They kind of struck out on their own and did their own thing. I don't think a lot of people think of them as one and the same with like Patti Smith and like the Ramones and stuff, but they started in pretty much the same area, the same groundswell of stuff, maybe slightly later, Anyways, yeah, Plasmatics, good shit, good stuff. So next we got this Phlebotomy from Golgotha We Rise. This is a compilation of 90s stuff from this Greek band, and it's an interesting take on kind of melodic death metal with some kind of doom death influences. If I were to give you a very basic summation of what this sounds like to me, I'd say like Finnish stuff that's a little bit more melodic along the lines of Amorphous, Tales of a Thousand Lakes era maybe, combined with the Hellenic sound, Rotting Christ and that sort of thing. You got some angelic kind of backing vocals, female backing vocals, and some very heavy growls and things like that. This is an odds and ends compilation of different 7 inches and demos and stuff. But certainly if you like the Greek sound, if you like some melody and doom in your death metal, that's worth checking out for sure. And then, as I mentioned, I got a couple of other CDs by the Bottle Doom Lazy Band from France. I talked about their LP recently. The first thing I got was this live album, 2005 to 2020. So this is just them playing all the hits from when they began in 2005. The more I listen to these guys, the more I'm like, this is heavily influenced by Reverend Bizarre. Like, weirder vocals, dude's probably legitimately drunk, but that sort of rollicking, not taking itself too seriously brand of doom is very, very much what this band is all about. This is a recent one. This is Clans of the Alphane Moon. Came out last year in 2024. Probably the best sounding record I own by them. This is very well produced, well put together. But again, you got those unhinged, kind of hammered, warbling kind of doom vocals all over everything. Definitely dig that. Then this is a release on Nameless Graves from 2023. See if I can pronounce this without screwing it up. Veriluola, Cascades of Crimson Cruor. This is a project, 2 guys, 1 American, 1 Finnish, if I'm remembering right. This is cool. It is very Also very kind of Mediterranean sounding, like kind of melodic, mortuary drape-ish kind of music, but with a little bit more grit to it, almost like a really ugly kind of death metal tinge to the vocals and the recording. It's not a one-to-one, but I'd say if you like that era of stuff that came out, like maybe starting almost 10 years ago with like Perverted Ceremony and One End of Zezbeth, it's like a little bit more melodic version of that. It's got that sort of mystical kind of serpentine kind of feel to it, if you know what I mean. So that's definitely great. Nameless Graves, great label. I always support them. Worth a poke there. Then this was a viewer recommendation. Hell Submersus. Really, really, really caustic sludge stuff. Abrasive doesn't really begin to describe the guitar tone. It's got that, very painful on the eardrums. I'm not always a fan of that. I find that like that really captured well distortion and just grit. That sort of was starting to be communicated well without it getting blurred out. Probably, a long time ago now, like the early 2000s. I feel like Nasm Inhale Exhale was like a groundbreaking record for that kind of production with that level of distortion. And this certainly captures that. It is rough on the eardrums, but the riffs are fantastic. They do kind of roll into some kind of almost kind of Sabbathy moments here and there, but it's just pure pain listening to this thing. This is an American band, and this is a recent release. I want to say 2024, 2025. On Sentient Ruin, which is a label that I know I had some stuff by not that long ago, but I recently went in and bought like 2 or 3 releases, all of which I'm going to talk about. And I got this one as well, and then a Pasmo LP. Couldn't be happier with that label. They put out a lot of really interesting stuff, so support them. The Pasmo record's really good. I'll talk about it probably the next update. But this is Threat by Hateful Abandon. This came out early this year, February 2025. British project. They've been recording and putting this stuff together from 2014 to 2024, so it's a decade-long labor of love. It's really harsh, kind of, just calling it industrial might not really be giving it the love and respect that it needs. It might be a bit of a disservice to just say industrial. It's along the lines of The Swans. It's along the lines of Street Cleaner era Godflesh, Killing Joke at certain moments. It's very harsh pounding, mostly kind of organically created from what I can tell, industrial-ish kind of music. And it's, again, along the lines with everything else that I've picked up from this label recently, very caustic sounding, very punishing, kind of leans into their quieter moments, kind of lean into like a more of a Marshall industrial kind of thing. But certainly if you like all that kind of stuff, slightly more accessible Swan stuff, maybe not straight up Copy on God, but that's there plenty. And Killing Joke, like early Killing Joke, this is for you, Street Cleaner. Great stuff. Hateful Abandon, check it out. Switching gears, this was talked about on one of the Reddits I was reading, like Doom Metal, I think. Trees of Eternity, Hour of the Nightingale. This came out almost 10 years ago on Svart. Came out in 2016. Alea, the vocalist, passed away, I think before this was even released, sadly. And she had an angelic voice. This is very, very, very slickly produced, like I'd say gothic doom metal. You would get maybe, I don't know, comparing it to other bands, probably Paradise Lost when they completely lost the growls, that sort of thing. I'm sure Tristania maybe. I'm sure there's better comparisons that I can't think of. It's all clean vocals. There's, speaking of Paradise Lost, there's guest vocals by Nick Holmes on the last track there, where he's just doing his baritone kind of sad thing. He sounds great. She sounds amazing on this. It is very slickly produced, so I haven't really been in the mood for it that much. I don't know if it's 100% my thing, but it is extremely well executed, kind of gothic doom metal, we'll say. Then we got Iron Man, Generation Void. This is just me filling out my Iron Man collection. Maryland Doom Band, been talking about him a bunch lately, listening to him a bunch lately. This is, I don't know if they went on an official hiatus, but they did a couple of records in the 90s and then came back for this one. This was released on a couple of different labels. I actually accidentally bought 2 copies of this, so maybe I'll gift one to somebody who wants it. But this is Shadow Kingdom. I think this is a reissue, and it comes with a DVD, which I would love to watch, but probably will never get around to. More of the same with this, you know, like they're back for a new recording on this. Their sound is great, you know, it's pretty tight and everything, but they kept that rawness that they have from their first 2 albums, and it keeps that token sound that they have that's rooted in the 70s, but more so like Dio influenced. I feel like it's got like a lot of like Rainbow and Black Sabbath Dio era stuff to it, I feel. Great riffs though, very heavy churning kind of riffs, evocative vocals, you know, everything's right there on tape. It's not like super layered or anything. It's got like a raw vibe to it, which I really like. Then, I mean, I bought this and I was like, this looks like super generic, but it's everything I want right now, so I'm buying it. It was cheap. Lords of Mercy by Doomraiser. I mean, Doomraiser, you know. An Italian band. This came out in 2006 on Iron Tyrant. And it's actually pretty good. You know, it's not super derivative. You know, it's definitely got the stonery, Sabbathy kind of thing going on with the music. Good riffs, solid riffs. The vocals are more of a croon. You know, they owe just as much to, I'd say, Ian Astbury as anything else, or Danzig. Like, it's more of a kind of a croon as opposed to somebody trying to imitate Ozzy or Dio or something like that, which I like to hear. You don't hear that as much in Doom that I think you should. It seems like that would happen more. You know, I feel like Goatsnake's a big one for that kind of vocal style in like a heavy, slower sound. And there maybe Kruthu from Michigan. There's a few examples of that, but I don't really hear that as much, which is probably good. If there was a million bands doing it, it'd probably get pretty tiresome. Then we've got Revelation, Never Come Silence. This is me just filling out my Hellhound collection. I believe it's the first album by this Maryland band. I'm going in on all the Maryland stuff a lot lately. You know, Internal Void, Iron Man, these guys, Earthride, all that stuff is really hitting home. I'd heard some other Revelation stuff that I was kind of meh on. A lot of it has to do vocally, the guy's reaching for sort of an Ozzy thing, but not quite hitting it. But it sort of starts to become charming after a while. A lot of the vocal lines go right along with the riff also, which is something that you have to kind of get used to. It has a charm unto itself, and it is super despondent most of the time and very, very, very melancholic, which is kind of stands apart from a lot of the Maryland Doom stuff, which gets a little bit more rockin', I feel. I read somewhere that these guys were quoted as being a big influence on Warning. So that kind of tracks. It does get to those levels of sort of melancholic, really slow stuff. Not to the level of Warning, though. And then I decided to pull the trigger on a Windhand CD just because I wrote them off years ago when they were pretty big, this Virginia band. They were playing a lot. I think they played Boston like a bunch of times in one year. And me being the contrarian that just doesn't like popular stuff, I was like, what is this hipster shit? What is this hipster Doom? Without really, I mean, I gave it a listen back then and wasn't super impressed. And I figured I'd go back. And I'm not blown away or completely regret it or anything. I've done that plenty of times where I was like, oh, my head was up my ass. But this is solid. I heard the debut, the self-titled debut. That really didn't do much for me. And maybe that's why. Maybe I just checked out that first one and left it. But this Grief's Infernal Flower CD came out 2015 on Relapse. This is starting to go in a little bit of a unique direction from their earlier stuff, their like demo and first recording there. I feel like this is starting to take on a little bit of a tiny bit of like a slight Alice in Chains like grunge kind of thing. I like the vocals, I like the way she sounds, but they are, and I know that it's like an artistic choice production wise to have it kind of above the music, so it's like this floating above, like ethereal kind of thing, echoing in the distance kind of thing. But I don't know, that only works for certain types of music for me. I'd prefer it to be more upfront personally, but that's what they sound like and that's what they're into. So that's not necessarily my thing, but some of the riffs are pretty crushing and heavy. You can say that like just the tone and everything, they probably have listened to their fair share of Sleep and Electric Wizard, but it's a little bit more commercially packaged, I'd say, or a little bit easier, a little bit more accessible, we'll say, than those bands. But it has that throbbing, super heavy tone to it, very well produced. Yeah, and I can't remember somebody recommended, I think, the one after this as being like the really good one. So I'll check that out at some point, give it a listen online and see how I feel about it. Another one that people have been saying, hey, you got to check out if you're in a doomy mood, you got to check out Ahab, German funeral doom band. This is the Divinity of Oceans, their second record, if I'm remembering right. This came out on Napalm Records in 2009. And this is incredible. I mean, the combination of the super low growls, you know, obviously owing a lot to pioneers of this sound like Disembowelment and Thurgothan. It's Thurgothan, right? Those bands, you know, Evoken and stuff like that, combining it with this like baritone wailing, mournful kind of thing. They are masters of balancing songs between serene moments and crushing heaviness. The nautical theme is super unique. Yeah, this is awesome. This is great. Ahab, this rules. Let me get out of the heavy stuff for a moment, talk about some Kraut and psych stuff. I'm continuing on that little journey. Popol Vuh. I'm not going to try to pronounce that. Well, why not? Why not sound like an idiot? Anstiger and Siebanger. Nailed it. German prog rock, psychedelia, kraut rock, whatever you want to call it. Very folky. I like this a lot because it has a nice serene, it's got a lot of acoustic kind of psychedelic stuff going on to it. It feels like very like kind of ancient in a way. Certainly not at all like Neu, which is the other thing that falls under that uncomfortable moniker of kraut rock that I have in this pile. The self-titled Neu here. This is way more kind of ambient, soundtracky. And then when it goes into music, like music with a bass line and stuff like that, it feels very post-punk, even though I'm sure it predates that. It starts to sound like early Joy Division or something like that, and takes on sort of like a more rhythmic pace, which is cool. I do enjoy this. I really like the Popol Vuh, though. It's very, very serene sounding. It's like very cool, like rainy day kind of music. And then I figured, you know, I've tried with later Pink Floyd, or all the big popular albums. Namely, I've tried The Wall, and Dark Side of the Moon. My stepdad was a big fan of them. He had the LPs when I was growing up. And other than being fascinated by whatever the hell was going on in the gatefold art of The Wall, I never really could get into the music. I'm going to get a sip of coffee here. But a couple of things made me want to revisit them and listen to Piper at the Gates of Dawn. My dog's name is Piper, for one thing. Another is the guy who produced my old Crust bands and released our records was like a Boston townie dude that was like obsessed with this album. He was into Crust and everything, but he was obsessed with this album and was like, dude, you got to put on, I forget what song it's from actually, but it's like a flute intro, and just like put it as an intro on one of our 7-inches, which was kind of weird, but it was cool. And finally, of course, Astronomy Domine was covered by Voivod, which we all know on Nothing Face. So I figured all those factors, the fact that I'm checking out more and more, psychedelic stuff, I'd check this out, and it's cool. I mean, this is with Syd Barrett, who is known for being kind of an eccentric guy, kind of an acid casualty. This feels like still kind of rooted in like 60s rock and roll before going completely off the deep end into psychedelia. I listened to it a couple times. I do like it. Need to spend more time with it, if I'm being honest. But yeah, Piper at the Gates of Dawn. This and Saucerful of Secrets are the ones that I really wanted to explore. And I know there's probably a billion of you out there, because I have that many watchers, shaking their fists and being like, how can you not be into The Wall and Dark Side of the Moon? I don't know, man. I don't know. Something about it just doesn't do it for me. But this is a little weirder and older sounding, and I dig it for what it is. But mostly it's been a background spin, really, if I'm being honest. Then we've got Depression from Russia. This is all in Russian. Let me pull it up. When I ripped it, the version they found on Grace Note or whatever it is actually pulled up a version with translations. Let me see. Where is it here? Crucifixion of Gods, Wreath of Sorrow. Looks like it's 2 releases on one. 1995, Russia. So, right after the Berlin Wall fell, 5 years or so. Still very obscure in a lot of ways. You're going to get a certain vibe on anything that side of the Iron Curtain, even if it's no longer up for a number of years, that's going to have just a certain something that bands from the West don't, and I don't know what it is. Whether you're talking about speed metal, death metal, if it's Polish or Ukrainian or Romanian or Russian, all that stuff is just going to have a little something, even if it's like a super harsh recording quality or whatever. This is doom death. Very well done doom death, may I add. That's, very despondent and sad, but very heavy, very death metal at the same time. Got a great amount of melody on it. Obviously, if you like all the early Peaceville stuff, this is like a weird Eastern Bloc cousin of that, and it's great. And then finally, just to round it out and keep it international, I guess, we got a Chilean band called Bewitched, Dragonflight. This originally just came out on cassette. It was reissued, Kelty Records, 2007. It's from 96. And all this interest in like blackened heavy metal lately, Malacorpidon, Morgul's Blade, that band Halberd that's blowing up, although I haven't listened to them yet, so I can't really say for certain, but Molten Chains, all this stuff that kind of combines the traditional heavy metal stuff with black metal shrieks and that sort of thing. This was long before all that, 1996 from Chile. They got the corpse paint going and everything, and it's very, very cool, very singular. There's not too much I've heard like it, including the aforementioned bands. It does combine melody and black metal aesthetics, black metal shrieking, but it's got a lot of clean vocals. They're sort of going for kind of a Merciful Fate kind of thing. It's got a lot of up-tempo, kind of triumphant metal stuff with it, but they do kind of lurch into almost doomier territory here and there. It's super unique. It's really cool. I like this a lot. This is neat. This is a neat listen. It's raw, it's South American stuff from the mid-90s. Not like basement recording raw, but it's got a certain level of grit to it, which is pretty much a precursor. It's pretty much a necessary thing for me to really enjoy anything. Few exceptions there, but yeah, overall, I mean, this is pretty great, pretty good stuff. If you're exploring like blackened heavy metal stuff, anything recent, if you like blackened thrash too, I'd say it falls in that bucket here and there as well. So check it out. And that's about it for now. We're pretty much done here. I am gonna go to the gym and then, I don't know, edit this or something and try to enjoy my last day before going back to work. All right, I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.